Do you really want to be holding twice the weight to get half the performance? I don't know, that's crazy. Yo, what is up, you guys? So here we have with probably two of the best devices of our generation. We have the GPD Win Max 2, and over here we have the Nintendo Switch. Probably two of the best, but maybe two of the most different devices of our generation. Now, I do love the GPD Win Max 2, but what if it's too big? I mean, look at this thing. It's massive. It's too big, some people might say. Well, that's where something like the GPD Win Mini comes into play. So we can swap the Win Max 2 for another device from GPD, and that's actually the GPD Win Mini. So we have a replacement for the GPD Win Max 2, but what about the Nintendo Switch? One of the main features is you have this handheld, but you can actually remove the controllers. That's what makes this thing so special. Now, what if this is actually too small? The Win Max 2 is too big, the Switch is too small. Well, that's where we have a device like this. This is the big boy. This is the Onexplayer X1, probably the biggest device that I have in the collection, in the studio today, and it actually has those detachable controllers that we like to see. And today, I think it's time for us to put these devices up against each other to see which one comes out victorious. Now, you may be saying these devices are very different, but we have to put them to the test. We have to determine which one is the one to beat. So let's not waste any time. Let's check out these devices. And the first thing we want to take note of is the actual display. Now, the Onexplayer X1, as you can see, has a much larger display, maybe 2 times the size. Not quite, but it is pretty large. It is a 10.95 inch, so almost 11-inch display. It is a 2560 by 1600 resolution, so 1600p, but it's actually a portrait native display. We're going to talk about why that matters in a second. So 1600p, it is 120 hertz, which is amazing. So it is very large. I will say it is a very immersive screen. Now, it probably looks ridiculous to some people with these tiny controllers on this large screen, and I guess it's a matter of taste, but I think the display is actually pretty good on this. Very large, very dense as far as pixel count resolution, and it is fast at 120 hertz. Now, moving on to the GPD Win Mini, as the Mini name suggests, a much more smaller, some people might say a much more reasonable size display. It is a 7-inch display, 120 hertz, and it is 1920 by 1080, so 1080p of course, and it is a landscape native display, and that's one of the main features on this. But I think the biggest selling point of this display is that it actually has VRR. That's right, and it is amazing on this handheld here. I will say that the Onexplayer X1 has a little bit higher saturation, but these can both be adjusted. I think that the Intel does have a little bit more saturated look. This is more of a natural look, but they do both look pretty good. Now, this is pretty much the same display on the RGLI. So if you love that RGLI display, you're going to love the display on the GPD Win Mini. I think it is amazing, especially with that native landscape, with that 120 hertz VRR. We have variable refresh rate on this display. That takes it to another level in my opinion. And of course the X1 is bigger, but I think this is a better display. Having native landscape VRR, that makes it a better display in my mind. Now, if you want a bigger display, then obviously there's no competition. But as far as a better display, I think having variable refresh rate and native landscape is a definite win for this device here. Now, before we even go any further, let me show you why native landscape is actually a benefit. Okay, you guys, let me tell you why having a native landscape display really matters on a handheld. You may not think it matters, but let me show you why it matters. Now, I'm going to do something as simple as change the resolution. Check this out. I am now playing at 1080p, as you can see here. Now watch this. I'm just going to change the resolution to 720p. I go about my day, continue to play the game, get better performance because I lowered the resolution. Now let's check out the what happens when I do that same thing on the X1, which has a native portrait display. I go to change the resolution as you would, you know, you need to get better performance. So you go change the resolution just so you can get a little bit better performance. Now, I'm going to go down to 800p because this is a 16 by 10 display. I'm going to apply that, and look at this, you guys. Look at this. It pretty much breaks the game every time you change the resolution. And there's a lot of games that when you change the resolution, it breaks the game, or sometimes the game starts in like a weird window, and then you have to actually restart the game to actually fix this. And then it will pretty much have the resolution changed, and that will solve the problem. But I have to actually restart the game when I have a native portrait display. On a native landscape display, I just change the resolution, and there's absolutely no issues with the resolution or the screen in any game. With a native portrait display, I know it's few and far between, but there are some games where it's really an issue, and a lot of older games or emulated games is really an issue if you have a native portrait display. And that's why I think having a native landscape display is such an amazing feature. But that's enough about the display. Let's go on to talk about the design. Okay, so as far as design goes, we actually have two very different design philosophies with these two devices. Now, the Onexplayer X1 actually has what they call a 3-in-1 design, and in order to get it to that 3-in-1, I have to get the keyboard attachment here. So once I connect this keyboard attachment, we actually have the 3-in-1 sort of design that Onexplayer was actually going for with this device. So as you can see here, we now have the 3-in-1 device. Now, this is pretty much a handheld, of course, with the controllers. It is also a tablet. If you take the controllers off, now you have a tablet. Then you attach the keyboard, and now you are in full laptop mode. So we have a keyboard here, which is actually pretty decent. Trackpad is not so decent. It does get the job done, but I wouldn't really trust it for anything more than just moving the cursor and clicking and, you know, two-finger clicking for a right click. Now, the thing about this 3-in-1 sort of design is that, in my opinion, it's like a jack of all trades, but it's really a master of none. Now, as far as being like a jack of all trades, as a handheld, it's like obnoxiously large. I mean, look at this, you guys. Look how big this is. Now, I have pretty large hands. I can actually grip the entire device with one hand, but just look how big this is. Look at how giant this is next to, you know, the ROG Ally is not the smallest device, but this is, I guess, a reasonable size device. It's just huge. Then, you know, look at it next to the Steam Deck, which is larger than the ROG Ally, but it's still like not obnoxiously huge. The Steam Deck is on the larger side of all the handhelds on the market, only smaller than like the Legion Go and something like that. But look how big this thing is. It's really huge. And as a handheld, I think the size, you know, makes it softer because it's so big. But then look at the controllers, like they're so tiny. And the thing about the controllers, like I'm gonna get to the ergonomics, but the ergonomics are not the best. I'll talk more about that when we get to it, but it's not the best. So it has, you know, the 3-in-1 aspect, but it's not really good in any of those categories. I will say that as just a tablet, it's probably the most powerful 11-inch Windows tablet. I don't know if we have a more powerful 11-inch Windows tablet on the market today, but as a tablet, I would say as a Windows tablet, it probably is the most powerful in this size category, which I guess is what it has going for it. But then as a laptop, it's also just decent because the stand is not the best, but it can get you by. The keyboard is not the best, you know, but it'll get you by. The trackpad is probably the weakest on any laptop available today. You know, it will get you by. And as a laptop, it's not really that great because on your lap, it's not good. It's better off on like a desk, like I have it here, or a flat, you know, stable surface. I wouldn't really trust this on the lap only because the stand is not the best. It comes off easy. And it's really not the best as a laptop on your lap. On the desk, as a laptop, it's decent. You can type stuff out and do what you need to do, but it's not the best in any category. Now, as far as the GPD Win Mini design goes, it has this clamshell design as you see here. So it is closed and it's like a mini laptop. So right now you can see I'm opening it up. It's like a mini laptop with controllers on it. So we have a trackpad. I would say the trackpad is probably better than the trackpad on the X1, which is saying something. Keyboard it reminds me of like the old, Blackberries. The keyboard does feel pretty good for thumb typing. I wouldn't type any essays or anything like that, but for thumb typing or even typing in like, names or passwords and stuff like that in games, it does actually do very well. The keyboard feels pretty good. It's like a membrane keyboard. It's not like clicky like one of these keyboards, but it does feel good to actually press, and it doesn't feel cheap or anything like that. So I do think the design is very unique. Clamshell mini laptop versus the 3-in-1 small laptop, I guess you would call it, and Windows tablet. So I guess the X1 is more versatile in the fact that it can be a tablet or a handheld and a laptop, when the GPD Win Mini is like, I'll just call it a handheld with a keyboard. That's what I would call it. But it does have that clamshell design that is going to make it ultra portable. I have the grips on mine. You can actually take the grips off to make it more portable. Here's my other GPD Win Mini, the first edition. You can actually take the grip off to make it ultra portable. Now look how small this is. This is just ultimate portability. Still have that nice 7-inch screen. It still feels pretty good in the hand. But yeah, if you want the controllers off or the grip off, you still get ultimate portability. Now, as far as talking about those grips, now let's talk about the ergonomics and controls. So, they're going to be in your hand. How do they feel to hold, and how do they feel to actually play as handhelds? Now, let's take off the keyboard from the X1 and let's talk about the controls here. Now, with the X1, of course, as I said before, the controllers are detachable, and that's what sort of makes it a handheld. You can put the controllers on, that makes it a handheld. Now, I will say, the sticks actually feel good. They're not the largest, like they're not full Xbox size, but they are larger than like a Nintendo Switch. They're in between Switch and Xbox. They actually do feel good. These are Hall effect joysticks, Hall effect triggers here. So everything feels good. The buttons are actually pretty clicky. I don't know if you can hear that there, but the buttons actually are pretty clicky. Everything feels tactile. Everything feels good. I do think it's an overall good quality controller. We even have some buttons in the back. So it actually is, the overall quality is good. But because the controllers are so small, it's really the right joystick is where I have my problems with this controller. It's just not comfortable. Now, look at me holding it normally. The left stick actually feels good. It's in a comfortable place. But look at the right stick. So if I go from the buttons to the right stick, look at how cramped up my thumb is. Like, this is like really arthritis, carpal tunnel just to get to this joystick, especially if you take it down to its lowest point. This is really like cramping my thumb here, not comfortable. Now, if you play like this with your thumb just resting on top of it, I guess it's not so bad because your thumb isn't like in carpal tunnel action. But is really, to get more control, you're usually playing like this, and it's not really that comfortable. But I will say, because it is detachable, now this is one thing I guess that sets it apart. Because it is detachable, you can actually get third-party controllers to go on to the X1, and this is one that I actually use fairly often. You can actually put this controller on. It feels a little bit better. The controllers and ergonomics as they are out of the box is not the best. I will say that is not the best. Overall, the ergonomics get a pretty low score, only because it's such a large device with such small controllers. Now, I also took off points from the controllers because they don't work when detached. Now, they don't have a battery or anything. So when they're detached, you actually can't use these controllers. Now, you can get a controller connector. I did get the one for the Onexplayer 2. Here it is. So it's like this controller bridge that goes in between, and that allows you to use it as a controller. But on top of that, you also need to use this USB dongle. So now you lose one of your USB ports. You can only use it with this special attachment. And I really take off points for that because I really wish it was like the Legion Go or the Switch where the controllers could work on their own. I don't know if that's like a limitation with the technology they have available, but I just have to take off points because once you remove these controllers, they're pretty much just paperweights at that point. It is nice that they detach just so you can have like a tablet, but as the controllers themselves, I do really wish that they, worked when not on. So they don't have the best ergonomics. They don't really, feel comfortable. They don't work when detached. So, take that for what it is. Now, moving on to the GPD Win Mini controls and ergonomics. The sticks and triggers are also Hall effect. So they do actually have a pretty good precision, I will say. But I will have to admit that in order to have this clamshell designed for ultimate portability, they did have to really sacrifice on the sticks here. Now, as you can see, they are recessed into the body. They are like Nintendo Switch size, so you're not going to get the most travel, the most precision. But because they are Hall effect, it does sort of mediate some of that drift, of course, and also does help with precision because Hall effect is usually more precise. Now, I do usually use like gyro aiming in FPS games because this tiny bit of travel is not the best in FPS games, but you can get used to it. Now, in terms of ergonomics, you see these giant grips on here. I do love the grip attachment. It does add so much in terms of ergonomics that to me, this is like the best ergonomic feel of, any handheld, especially at this size. But I will say to add the grip, you do lose that ultimate portability. But going back to the original Win Mini, without the grip, it does still feel pretty good. Now, it does feel like I'm holding like a Nintendo Switch because it's completely flat on the back, so it's not really much to hold on to. Your hands is pretty much just resting in your hand, but it's so light. It's a size where it feels good to hold even without the grip. So ergonomics, I actually give it a better ergonomic score than the X1, just because you can add that modular grip and you can also take it off. And to take off the grip, it's pretty easy. Check this out. Get a screwdriver and just loosen up the screw on the back here, and you can have that grip off just like that. In a matter of seconds, the grip can be off, and then you're off to the races with the ultimate portability. And I actually like to run it with one grip. I call me crazy. I made a whole video on this, but I like to run it with one grip because then it fits in the slim case, and you get the best of both worlds. You get portability, and you get, the grip where it matters on the right hand side. Sorry, left-handers, I always say that, but the grip being on the right side where most of the actions are, your left hand can just support, and then you still get a great ergonomic experience. But I will say I do like the ergonomics on the Win Mini more, but the actual controls are better on the X1 only because they are larger. This is like Vita style. The buttons are very clicky. Everything feels good, but it's just smaller, so I can't give it the highest score because the bigger joysticks with more travel do actually feel better in my opinion. Now, you may like the small joysticks because of the portability it gives you, but I'm just being honest, the small joysticks are not the best available, on the market, of course. Now, moving on from the controls and ergonomics, let's talk about the ports because the ports are very different and also a bit controversial on these devices here, and we'll talk about what I mean as far as the controversy goes. Now, the ports on the X1 are also kind of controversial, but let's start on the top. We have the Oculink port on the top here. We have Oculink and a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack there, and on the side we have two USB-C. I know it's hard to see. We'll talk about that. That's why it's controversial. On the side, we have USB-A and a micro SD card. Now, let's talk about why it's controversial or maybe just not the best design. As you can see, this top port is accessible with the controllers on. This second port is inaccessible when the controllers are on, and I think that's kind of really a miscalculation, I guess you would call it, that you can only use both of your ports when the controller is off. So I guess in tablet or laptop mode, you have both of your ports, but I really think it is a missed opportunity to not have both of your ports when you are in handheld mode. So in handheld mode, you can either charge or have a USB a peripheral connected, not both, which I think is a oversight. But I'm not an engineer, so what do I know? I just think that it's weird that you can't use both of your ports and one of them is being blocked by the controller. I don't know if that's weird. Leave a comment if down below if you think that's weird, because to me, blocking one of the ports just seems like an oversight. But like I said, I'm not an engineer, so what do I know? No, I would like to see on the next version, maybe the X2, put one USB-C on one side and one USB-C on the other. That way you can charge from either side, and then maybe move the USB-A to the top, for your peripherals. I think having a USB-C on both sides will really take this to the next level, but that's maybe something for the X2. Now, ports on the GPD Win Mini, this is where the controversy comes into play. Now, the reason I talk about controversy is I'm going to have to bring the original GPD Win Mini on the stage for this. Now, let's talk about the ports. We have a USB C. Let's talk about the USB-C first. USB-C 3.2, USB-C 4.0. That's going to allow you to use eGPUs and get the full 40 gigabits. The other one is going to give you, 10 gigabits per second. We have a 3.5 millimeter headphone jack, and then we have the SD card. No, this is the controversy. The USB-A port. And the reason it's controversial is because on the original GPD Win Mini, or the GPD Win Mini 2023, you see that on the top, we had an Oculink port, and that was replaced with a USB-A port. Now, leave a comment down below if you prefer the Oculink or if you like the actual USB-A. Now, I didn't use the Oculink port that much, so I actually like the USB-A for peripherals. But you have to be honest, the Oculink is a much faster port, much better for eGPUs that support it. So that's why it's a controversy, because those who really use that Oculink port, now it kind of makes no sense for them to get the upgraded GPD Win Mini because they lose the functionality of the Oculink port. So leave a comment down below if you like the Oculink port, because I know you're out there and I see you guys. I don't know why they took it off. Maybe most people didn't use it, but it is a controversial port to have that new USB-A. But there you go. No Oculink. It's been replaced with USB-A. So make of that what you will. So yeah, now let's go back into the devices from the ports and let's talk about the software on these devices. And I guess you can kind of see the software here. And the software on these two devices is actually pretty different. Now, the built-in software on the Onexplayer X1 is called One X Console, as you can see here. Now, let me go into the game launcher mode, and I do think the One X Console is actually pretty good. Now, it has all of your games in here, and I didn't have to set this up. It pretty much scans for your games automatically, and if it doesn't find a game, you can go in and you can search for a game manually. It will search. You can search your entire system for your games, add them manually, and then you can actually add the art here. Now, this art was all added automatically by One X Console, so I didn't do any of this. It pretty much just scanned my SSD for the games, and it puts them there. You can actually have your favorites in here. You can set up your favorites and often play it. Now, in One X Console, you can also, map all of your controls. So I have the ability to map all of my controls to be any function. I can map my A button to be the volume button for whatever reason. All of the controls are mappable, and we also have the ability to map those buttons in the back here to be whatever you want it to be. I have one to be the X button, and the other is this combination of keys which actually activates lossless scaling. So that can actually be keyboard macros that you can have on the back buttons, and I do think it actually is good. Now, you can actually adjust your triggers. You can adjust the dead zone and different things like that, and you can actually adjust the joysticks and the dead zones, the sensitivity. All of that can be mapped here. So I'm gonna turn on zero dead zone mode, and now I have that locked in. So the control aspect is actually pretty good, but the main feature of this is actually the ability to adjust your TDP and control the power levels on the actual device. So you can see here, I have the TDP slider here, and that can go all the way from 35 watts all the way down to 6 watts and all the way in between. I can actually control this with the controller if you were curious. You can actually control that with the controller here. Now we have TDP control, fan control. The fan is actually good. You have two presets, and we can actually make that whatever we want it to be. As you can see, I have one preset that's pretty much just 100% all the time, and then I have another preset that is a little bit less aggressive. You can actually edit that by just tapping on the screen, and it will add points wherever you want them to be. It adds the points that relates to a temperature, and that relates to a fan percentage. So you have actually ability to customize the fan curves as you want them. Now, another feature on here is, of course, vibration settings. You can actually adjust the resolution, a bunch of different resolutions here, more resolution than you would ever need. You can adjust the RGB. So they have a various amount of customizable presets, or you can just make it a standard color if you would like. So that's good to see. We also have the performance overlay, which is going to add the performance metrics on the top here, and then you can actually drag and drop that and move it just like the RG Ally. But what makes this unique is the fact that you have like the ability to lock your FPS to any of these numbers here from 30 all the way to 120. But when you lock the FPS, it also gives you the ability to have automatic TDP. And what automatic TDP does, it pretty much locks your FPS, and then it dynamically changes the TDP to keep that FPS. I do think that is a great feature. I don't use it because I don't like the way that sometimes if you're in a heavy graphical scenario, and it doesn't really manage the TDP perfectly to my taste, but it does work, for those people that just want to set it and forget it. I think it is a great option to have. Now, you also have the ability to, change the overlay to be a horizontal or, vertical window. So you have that ability there. And you have the ability to put on your CPU turbo, your gyroscope. This is going to set your gyro to be either like mouse mode to move the mouse, or it will emulate an Xbox controller or a PS4 controller, and then put the gyro controls on top of that, which is, good to see. One thing that really stands out to me in this is the fact that you have a game trainer built into the One X console here. And what a game trainer is pretty much like mods or cheats for your games, and that's built into the actual device. So let me show you a game that it supports that, and let me show you why I think that's such a unique feature. Okay, you guys, check this out. Check out how the trainer works. Now, if I open up the One X console here, you can see it sees the game I'm playing now, Hades 2. If I open this up and activate it, you see I have a number of different like cheats or mods here. And what it does is pretty much opens a cheat engine, or like a trainer, whatever you call it, mod engine, whatever you want to call it. And I can actually activate that in the game. So I'll go here, open this up, and as you can see here, it has a bunch of different like cheats or mods here. I'll just tap this to activate the God mode here. Now go back to the game, and you're gonna see that it actually activated God mode. So as you can see here, now I can't die because I activated that that God mode. So I think that is a unique feature, the fact that it has like a trainer built in. Now, for games, I probably wouldn't suggest using like God mode in a game like Hades, because I guess dying is part of the process in this game. But for some games, like games that require a lot of grinding, you can maybe like give yourself like more coins or something like that to unlock something that requires a lot of grinding that is kind of monotonous. But of course, you can't cheat in online games, and I really don't suggest you even trying to cheat in online games. But I think it's just like a fun little inclusion that you have like cheats and mods built into the actual control center. I just thought that was a really unique feature. I don't usually use it, but it is there, and I think that is a very unique and dope feature, something I've not seen on any other handheld before. Now, okay, let's talk about the software on the GPD Win Mini. And it definitely goes along with the Mini name, because it is the most minimal control software I've seen on any handheld. Now, you get two pieces of software. You have Win Controls, which actually allows you to I guess set the sensitivity of your joysticks with the dead zone there. And you have some options for when you're in mouse mode, and then you also have the ability to set the the extra buttons are. So L4 and R4, you can actually make those keyboard shortcuts there, or even button presses. You can actually set those to be that. Now that's how you know adjust those things. And then we have the what is called the motion assistant, and this is not even a piece of software that GPD makes himself. It's made by a third-party developer. But look at this, you guys. This is like just a bunch of boxes and numbers. And if you don't know what this means, you are going to really have to dig deep to figure out what's going on with this controller software. It really has probably the least user-friendly, you know, UI of all the handhelds I've ever seen. But it is actually a powerful piece of software. Now, as the name suggests, motion assistant, you can actually adjust your the gyro to be like the mouse, or emulate an Xbox or PS4 controller. So it does do that to emulate the gyroscope, as the name motion assistant suggests, motion with the controller. Now, for the TDP section, this is where all these numbers come into play. It actually has a very extensive, you know, control over the device. You can adjust the TDP. You know, you can change it in 1 watt intervals. You can also have it to optimize the GPU. And what that means is whatever TDP you're at is going to set the most optimal GPU clock speed to get the best performance. The developer really took the time to figure out what GPU clock speed was best for each TDP number, and that actually is usually the best performance on any handheld. I've actually used this number to get better performance on like some other devices just by setting it to the same clock speed as the motion assistant. So it is actually pretty good. One thing I will take away from it is just the user interface is not the most friendly. You really have to know what you're doing, or at least learn what everything means. And also you can't really control it with the controller. Now you can set up like hotkeys. I have like hotkeys to adjust the TDP with like the controls. You can actually do that, but you can't actually control the actual interface with the controller like you can with like every other interface on every other handheld. But it is pretty minimal as far as the user experience, a user interface, but it is pretty massive as far as the actual control you can have over the device. You can pretty much control everything with the device. If you go to like device, you can adjust things like the screen brightness, volume, resolution, different things like that. And you do have a lot of control as far as getting the best performance out of the device, but it's just, I guess, the most minimal I've ever seen on any handheld. But performance is definitely there. Now, speaking of performance, let's get to what you've all been waiting to see, and that is the performance between these two devices. Let's stop wasting any time. I know this video is way too long, but if you made it to this point in the video, comment down below massive. If you made it to this point in the video, comment massive, and you'll be entered to win a special prize. Make sure you comment massive down below. Now, this is where we see a huge difference in performance. This is where the GPD Win Mini starts to look massive next to the Onexplayer X1. Let's dive into the performance benchmarks. Now, right before we run the benchmarks, I will say these two devices, as far as specs go, we have the rivalry of the century. As the background suggests here, on the Onexplayer X1, we are running the Intel Core Ultra 7 155H. That's the new Intel, mobile chip, very controversial. And on the GPD Win Mini, we have the latest from AMD right now. That is the 8840U, the Ryzen 7 8840U. They both have 32 gigabytes of RAM, but they have two different manufacturers for the processor, Intel versus AMD. And Intel right now is catching a lot of heat because the performance is questionable, but let's get into the benchmarks and just see how different it is. Now, I'm going to run some tests. We're going to be at 25 watts on both of these. I know 25 watts is a lot for the Win Mini, but I have the unlocked BIOS. We're going to be at 25 watts on the Win Mini and 25 watts on the Onexplayer X1. And we're going to see that that may not be enough, but we're going to go to 25 watts on the X1. And then we're going to go to 25 watts on the Win Mini here. And we're gonna see just some benchmarks here just to see how they compare. Well, you probably already know which one wins, but let's just compare these both at 25 watts. Now, just a note, I have updated to the latest BIOS, the latest Intel Arc drivers. We've seen about 5 or 6 driver updates at this point, but we're gonna see just how the performance holds up. Now, let's dive into the test. Okay, so the first benchmark we're gonna run is the Returnal benchmark. Returnal is a very demanding game, so I think it's gonna give us the best opportunity to see how these devices do in those heavy AAA games. Let's run the benchmark, 1080p, low settings. Yeah, let's run the benchmark and see how it does. Now look, you guys, check this out. We have like some weird graphical glitches here. This is supposed to be a transparent shield, as you can see here, but it's just like a blob of light here. This is the latest driver, and that's one of the another thing about Intel is that the drivers sometimes you have like weird graphical glitches, and that's just something you have to deal with the Intel chip. I just thought I'd note that it's not just performance that we're looking at, it's also just compatibility. And in some games, there is weird glitches, and it's just not the best experience as far as drivers go. No, let's look at the performance here. I think this is going to be a shock, or maybe not a shock. No, check this out. 1080p, low settings, actually 50% resolution scale with the upscaling, 31 FPS, and this is at 25 watts. Now, I'm not trying to like, cheat or anything. As you can see, we're at 25 watts here, 31 FPS. Okay, now look at this, you guys. This may be one of the best scores I've ever seen actually in this benchmark. 47 FPS, you guys. That is 16 FPS higher. Now, if you take 31, cut it in half, you're gonna get around 16. So that means we're getting 50% better performance at 25 watts on the GPD Win Mini 8840U. Now, to me, that's just crazy. And even if I go up to 35 watts, I get around 35 FPS. It's funny enough. That still doesn't even come close to the 25 watt performance on the GPD Win Mini 8840U. The 8840U, the 7840U, it's all pretty much the same. The 8840U only does maybe like 3 FPS more than the 7840U, so not that much. But just look at the discrepancy. 50% better performance at 25 watts. Now, I know that this is a very demanding game, so you're probably not always going to be playing AAA games, but if you're playing a game like this, getting 31 FPS at 25 watts versus 47, almost 50 FPS. That's actually the best I've actually seen in this benchmark to this day. So that is actually going on the latest drivers. That is actually pretty good, 47. But 31 is kind of crazy, you guys. 50% less performance. I don't know. That's just wild. Anyway, let's see if we can make up some ground in the next benchmark. So let's check it out. Okay, so the next benchmark we're running right now before you guys get out of here is the Cyberpunk benchmark. We're at 1080p, low settings, FSR set to performance. Still at 25 watts on both of these. Now, the Win Mini just finished here. We were able to get an average of 55 FPS. Not sure if you can see that, but we got an average of 55 FPS. And the Onexplayer X1 only got 37 FPS there. So that is a big difference. No, 55 to 37 is almost 20 FPS different, and that is a big deal. Now at the same settings, same TDP, I could go up to 35 watts on this, but we're not going to be able to make up that 20 FPS difference even if we go up to 30 watts. And that's really the main downfall of this Intel chip, is that the performance per watt is really not there. Now, talking about battery life, the last thing we'll talk about is we have a 65 watt hour battery here and a 45 watt hour battery here. But because we have to push this device so much harder to get equal or even less performance, the battery ends up sometimes evening out if you're running AAA games, because this needs 35 watts to get the best performance, and this you can come down to 20 watts. 18 watts, even 15 watts sometimes, and still get great performance. So you end up using twice as much battery to get the same or less performance on the Onexplayer X1. So it really is a huge discrepancy in performance. Now, I wouldn't suggest running the GPD Win Mini at 25 watts because it can get pretty warm, not like hot or enough to burn you, but it can get pretty warm, and for some people that is uncomfortable. With the grips it is manageable, but if you're holding the body of the device, it can get pretty warm on the back here and on the buttons. But you don't have to run this at 25 watts. You can run it at 20 watts, 18 watts, and you're gonna have a great time. If you try to run at 15 watts on the Onexplayer X1, you're gonna be playing like the most low graphical games that you can find, and it's not really the best experience for gaming. Now, for Windows stuff, it's going to be great, you know, for web browsing, for document editing, all the normal computer stuff, productivity. It's going to be great. You can take the TDP down to 15 and extend that battery life, but for gaming, it's just not there. We're getting 50% less performance in those AAA games. Sometimes we get 25% less performance. Sometimes we get 15% less performance, but we're never beating the AMD chip, and that's the problem, even when we're pushing more power into the device. Now, which one do I recommend? You guys, after seeing these performance numbers, it's hard to recommend the Onexplayer X1 as a gaming handheld. No, if you want it for that 3-in-1 aspect, then of course, I mean, consider it. I mean, you throw on that keyboard. Even though it's not the best, you can still throw that keyboard on, have the handheld, have the tablet, have the keyboard, make it a laptop. You can do a lot of things with this device, but it's hard for me to recommend it for a gaming device right now, simply because the drivers, the performance is not really there compared to the AMD version. Now, I would pick the Win Mini over the X1 only because as a handheld, a gaming device, I want to get the best gaming performance. But it's hard to recommend the Win Mini as a laptop replacement because, you know, the keyboard is pretty small. You're not going to really want this to replace your laptop, but it can definitely be your handheld companion, especially with the foldable form factor. You're going to have a great time if this is so much more portable, so much more powerful. I guess it's not more powerful, you know, but it's more powerful in games where it matters. And this is going to be really like the laptop replacement. But considering the size difference, I'll let you guys see this last thing before I let you go. Check out the weight difference on this here. The GPD Win Mini is only 560 grams with the grip attachment, 570 with with both grips on each side. Now take a look at this chungus. Oh my goodness. It is 1,360 grams. That's crazy. That's only 200 more grams, and it will be a full 1,000 grams or a kilogram heavier. That's crazy to me. The fact that this device is so heavy. I mean, that's with the keyboard, even in just handheld mode. Let's look at it in just handheld mode. Even without the keyboard in handheld mode, it is still 1,081 grams, a full kilogram. That's, to me, that's crazy. To have a full 1,000 gram handheld, that's wild. That's like twice the weight, you guys. Do you really want to be holding twice the weight to get half the performance? I don't know, that's crazy. But anyway, that's just the comparison between the massive and the mini, even though the performance is massive and the performance is kind of mini on this. But there you go. Two great devices, I guess, in their own way. A Win Mini for the win. You see what I did there. Anyway, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Make sure you like, subscribe, ring that bell, all that great YouTube stuff. This was extended look at these two devices, very different, 3-in-1 mini laptop. But let me know in the comments which one you think won this whole, you know, showdown. I guess performances and everything. So let me know in the comments below which one you think wins overall. Definitely doesn't, the X1 doesn't win in performance, so you have to give me some other reasons. But anyway, it's been real, it's been great. I think the Win Mini is definitely my favorite small device right now, and I don't think anything can replace this as far as a 7-inch handheld. I know you may think the ROG Ally X. I actually like this a little bit more than the ROG Ally, and the ROG Ally X comes I may reevaluate, but for now, I'm calling the GPD Win Mini the best small handheld right now. And yeah, I think it's great. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.